The call came as I was shutting down my computer after another 14-hour day. My daughter Madison's voice cut through the phone like a field report from a combat zone. "Dad, I'm at County General. The bike accident was worse than they thought. They need to operate on my leg tonight. I'm Sam Ford, 48 years old, and for the past 10 years I've been the director of corporate archives at Ridgefield Dynamics. 8 years Navy before that, intelligence division. The military taught me how to organize information, assess threats, and execute under pressure. Skills that translated perfectly to corporate archives work. Every contract, every compliance record, every piece of paper that could save or sink this company, that's my area of responsibility. But right then, none of that mattered. Madison's status report. What happened? Some drunk ran a red light, hit me head on while I was biking home from school. Her voice was steady but tense. That's my girl, 16 years old, and inherited my ability to stay focused under pressure. The doctors say they need to put some titanium pins in my leg or it won't heal properly. I was already reaching for my gear. After my divorce 3 years ago, it's been Madison and me. Well, and my dad, who's been living with us since his stroke last year. But Madison's my primary objective, and hearing strain in her voice activated every protective instinct I'd developed over 8 years of military service. Which room? I'm moving out now. That's when Victor Harlan's voice cut across the office floor like incoming artillery. Going somewhere, Ford? I turned around and there he was, our CEO for the past 3 years, standing by the glass-walled conference room with that expression he gets when he thinks someone's trying to abandon their post. Victor's the type who mistakes control for leadership. Family emergency, Mr. Harlan. My daughter requires immediate surgery. I'd dealt with officers like Victor during my Navy years, the kind who confuse rank with respect, who think authority means never showing flexibility. In the military, we had regulations to keep guys like that in check. In corporate America, they hand them corner offices. Surgery? He said it like I'd reported a minor equipment malfunction. And you're just leaving? We've got the Kellerman audit at 8 a.m. tomorrow. The preparation is complete, sir. Everything's organized and ready for the auditors. This can wait until morning. That's when he did something that triggered every warning system I'd developed over 2 decades of reading people in high-stress situations. He smiled. Not satisfaction, predatory calculation. So you're refusing overtime? The way he said it, you'd think I'd admitted to desertion under fire. Behind him, I could see other managers filtering into the conference room. 6 of them. People I'd worked with for years, all taking their positions like an assembled court-martial. This wasn't coincidence. Victor had planned this operation. I'm prioritizing a family medical emergency, sir. Pack up your things, Ford. You're done! The words echoed off the glass walls and hit the room like a flashbang. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard the order. 10 years with this company. A decade of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, canceled leave. I'd been here so many nights that the security guards knew my routine. And he was terminating my position with 4 words. I looked at the managers in that room, people whose operational failures I'd covered, whose files I'd organized when they couldn't locate what the auditors needed, whose careers I'd probably saved more than once. Not one of them would meet my eyes. They just sat there staring at their notepads like they contained classified intelligence. That's when I understood the tactical situation. Victor hadn't just terminated my employment, he'd conducted a public demonstration. Every person in that room received the message clearly. This is what happens when you prioritize anything above company objectives. Understood, I said, maintaining professional composure the way my commanding officers had taught me. Security will escort me out. I grabbed my coat and moved toward the elevator. My phone was buzzing with another call from Madison, probably wondering about my ETA. But as I walked past that conference room, I caught Victor's reflection in the glass. He was leaning back in his chair, briefing his audience of managers like he'd just eliminated a security threat. That's when something clicked in my operational mindset. Something that would change the entire mission over the next few weeks. See, Victor made one critical tactical error that night. He assumed that terminating me would neutralize the threat. He figured I'd conduct a quiet withdrawal, regroup somewhere else, and find another position where I could organize someone else's files and maintain operational silence. But here's what 10 years as an archives director teaches you. Intelligence doesn't lie. People lie, policies get reinterpreted, memories get compromised, but documented evidence? That tells the truth every single time. And I knew exactly where all the evidence was stored. Walking out to my vehicle, my phone buzzed with a text from Tony Martinez, one of the few guys in the office who still operated with integrity. He's been planning this for months. Just needed operational cover. That intel hit harder than the termination itself. This wasn't about overtime or the Kellerman audit or my daughter's surgery. Victor had been conducting reconnaissance, waiting for me to provide him with justification to execute his plan. The family emergency was just convenient timing. I sat in my truck for a moment, listening to my phone ring with another call from Madison. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed, injured and scared, and I'd just lost the position that paid for her medical coverage. Any civilian would be in full panic mode right about now. But I wasn't panicking. I was conducting threat assessment. And here's the thing about officers like Victor. They build their command structure on fear and operational silence. They count on people being too intimidated or too beaten down to mount any resistance. What they don't count on is someone who spent 10 years collecting intelligence on every questionable order they've ever issued. I answered Madison's call and told her I was en route. The surgery could wait a few more minutes while I made a quick reconnaissance stop at my office. After all, my security clearance was still active for another week. By the time I reached the hospital, Madison was already in pre-op. The surgical team reported everything went according to plan. 3 hours of work to install titanium pins in her leg, full recovery expected in 4 to 6 months. Solid intel, professional execution, good prognosis. But sitting in that waiting room at 0200 hours, I had plenty of time to conduct a thorough after-action review of what had happened at the office. And the more I analyzed the situation, the clearer the operational picture became. See, Victor thought he was conducting psychological warfare. Terminate me in front of witnesses so no one could claim it was personal retaliation. Frame it as refusing overtime so it sounded like legitimate business discipline. Standard intimidation tactics from someone who'd never served but thought he understood command structure. But here's what he didn't know. I'd seen his operational pattern before. 3 months ago, it was Jerry Sullivan from accounting. 8-year veteran, solid performance record, never caused disciplinary issues. But his wife got diagnosed with cancer and Jerry started departing at 1700 hours sharp to get her to chemotherapy appointments. 2 weeks later, Victor found justification to terminate his position. Before that, it was Lisa Torres from marketing. Single mother, needed to extract her kids from daycare before closing time. Started receiving written documentation for lack of commitment until she finally resigned. The pattern was clear once you knew how to conduct proper intelligence analysis. Victor didn't just run a company. He operated a systematic extraction machine designed to eliminate anyone who had priorities outside of corporate objectives. And if you had the operational nerve to maintain work-life boundaries, you became a target for elimination. Madison was still recovering from anesthesia when I transported her home the next morning. My dad was positioned in his wheelchair by the front door conducting his own threat assessment. He'd been a machinist for 30 years before his stroke, and he understood what losing employment meant for a family's defensive position. "How severe is the situation, son?" he asked while Madison maneuvered upstairs on her crutches. "Significant enough," I told him, "but I'm not conducting a withdrawal without engaging the enemy." That afternoon, while Madison was unconscious from the pain medication, I made a tactical decision that would alter the entire mission profile. I was returning to Ridgefield, not to request reinstatement or to clear out my workstation like a defeated combatant. I was returning to conduct intelligence gathering. You see, my security access was still operational. Administrative oversight, probably. These clearance revocations take several days to filter through the system. But it meant I could access the building, down to the basement level where they maintain the archives, where I'd spent 10 years organizing every piece of compromising intelligence this company had generated. The building was empty, except for a couple of security guards who recognized me well enough to acknowledge my presence. My office was exactly as I'd left it. File systems arranged like an armory, computers still logged into classified networks, coffee cups still positioned on my desk with yesterday's residue marking the bottom. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for ammunition. I began with the personnel files. Now, technically, I wasn't authorized to access HR records, but when you're the guy who organizes everything for regulatory audits, you tend to accumulate passwords and access protocols that people forget to revoke. What I discovered made my stomach execute a tactical maneuver. There were termination records going back 3 years, right to when Victor assumed command. 37 people eliminated for performance issues or cultural misalignment. But when I cross-referenced their duty schedules, every single one had the same operational characteristic. They'd resisted the overtime culture. Jerry Sullivan, Lisa Torres, Mike Rodriguez from facilities who got terminated after requesting leave for his son's graduation ceremony, Beth Hamilton from legal, eliminated 2 weeks after she filed a formal complaint about mandatory weekend operations. Victor had been conducting systematic elimination procedures. He'd document every minor infraction, arriving 5 minutes late, taking a full lunch period, departing before 1900 hours. Build up a paper trail that made the termination look justified. But the real reason was always identical. They wouldn't sacrifice their personal mission for his corporate objectives. I downloaded everything. Dates, schedules, termination justifications, even Victor's own operational notes in the margins. One file contained a handwritten comment that made my blood pressure spike. Needs attitude adjustment. Doesn't understand commitment level required. But the real strategic intelligence was buried in a folder marked Executive Strategy, classified. Inside was a memorandum Victor had written to his command staff, outlining what he called productivity enhancement initiatives. Military-style language for a simple concept. Extract more work output from fewer personnel by making the consequences of resistance absolutely clear. The memo established specific operational quotas. 90 hours per week minimum for all salaried personnel. Mandatory volunteer weekends for special projects. Leave requests denied during critical periods, which, according to the attached schedule, covered approximately 10 months annually. And at the bottom, Victor's signature in bold blue ink. Not just a policy recommendation, a direct order from the commanding officer to create what he called a culture of commitment. I photographed every page, uploaded them to a secure cloud server, made copies on 3 different storage devices. This wasn't just evidence of unfair labor practices, this was proof of systematic fraud. Victor had been lying to investors about productivity metrics, claiming increased efficiency when what he'd really accomplished was forcing people to work without compensation. I was preparing to extract when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Alert mode activated. Getting discovered down here with classified files would eliminate any credibility I had remaining. But instead of security, someone slipped an envelope under my door and conducted a silent withdrawal. I waited 10 minutes before opening it, half expecting some kind of counterintelligence trap. Inside was a meeting transcript from last week's executive session, the one that occurred right after Victor terminated my position. And there, in black and white, was confirmation of what I'd suspected all along. Ford was becoming a tactical problem, Victor had briefed his command staff. Too much institutional knowledge, too much access to sensitive files. The overtime refusal was just convenient operational cover. I've been looking for justification to eliminate him for months. Someone else in that building was conducting resistance operations, even if they couldn't do it openly. Someone with access to executive briefings who was willing to risk their own position to get me this intelligence. I added the transcript to my collection and finally conducted my extraction. But driving through the empty streets at 0300 hours, I realized something important. This wasn't just about conducting retaliation against Victor anymore. This was about all those people he'd eliminated. Jerry with his sick wife, Lisa struggling to raise her kids as a single operator, Mike missing his son's graduation. They'd all been silenced by fear and economic pressure. But I was different. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Victor had made one crucial tactical error when he terminated me. He'd converted the one person who knew where all the classified intelligence was stored into his primary adversary. By the time I reached my house, I had developed a mission plan. It was high risk, potentially dangerous, but it was also the right tactical approach. And after 10 years of maintaining operational silence and following orders, doing the right thing felt like the most radical action I could execute. I spent the weekend conducting operational planning. Spreadsheets, digital photographs of documents, termination records, the whole intelligence package spread across my dining room table like a tactical briefing board. Madison was recovering well, maneuvering around on her crutches, and she kept asking about my project status. Just some administrative work from the office, I told her. No point briefing a 16-year-old on corporate warfare and unemployment operations. But my dad knew better. Monday morning, he positioned his wheelchair next to the table and conducted his own assessment of everything I'd printed. This is about more than just getting terminated, isn't it? Affirmative, Dad. It's about a lot more than that. He picked up one of the termination files, Jerry Sullivan's record. 37 people? 37 that I could locate. Probably more. My dad was silent for a long time. Then he said something that stuck with me. Your mother always said you couldn't stand watching bullies pick on people. Guess that operational parameter hasn't changed. He was right. Back in high school, I'd gotten suspended twice for engaging bullies who were targeting smaller classmates. In the Navy, I'd filed formal complaints against officers who abused their command authority. And now, at 48 years old, I was still the same operator who couldn't conduct a strategic withdrawal when confronted with injustice. The question was, what tactical approach to take? I needed support, professional backup, someone with the legal knowledge and corporate connections to make this intelligence count for something. After some reconnaissance, I identified my target, Preston Knox. Knox was a board member at Ridgefield, but he operated differently from the others. Former federal prosecutor, reputation for conducting thorough operational reviews, and intelligence indicated he'd been pushing for more transparency in company operations. If anyone on the board would receive what I had to report, it would be him. Getting a meeting wasn't a simple operation. You don't just contact a board member and announce you've got evidence their CEO is running unauthorized operations. But I had one tactical advantage. I knew how the company's command structure functioned. I knew which assistant to contact, what time of day to reach her, and exactly what to say to get past the defensive perimeter. Mr. Knox? This is Sam Ford, former director of corporate archives at Ridgefield. I have documentation of systematic labor law violations and potential securities fraud that requires immediate board attention. Sometimes direct engagement is the only way through the defensive line. Knox's office was nothing like Victor's glass command center. Books everywhere, actual legal documents being analyzed instead of just shuffled around for show. When I entered with my intelligence package, he didn't waste time on preliminary operations. "Show me what you got, mister." Ford. I laid it out with military precision. The termination patterns, the forced overtime quotas, the memo outlining Victor's productivity enhancement initiatives, the meeting transcript where Victor admitted he'd been planning to eliminate me for months. Knox didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Just analyzed everything, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Finally, he looked up. If this documentation is accurate, we're not just looking at labor violations. This is securities fraud. Harlan's been lying to investors about productivity metrics and operational costs. That's when I knew we had achieved tactical superiority. Labor violations were serious, but securities fraud was career-ending territory. The kind of charge that brings federal investigations and congressional hearings. "What's our next operational phase?" I asked. "Now I present this to the board. Emergency session, probably within the week." Knox gathered up the documents. "You understand this is going to escalate quickly. Harlan won't conduct a withdrawal without engaging." I thought about Madison on her crutches, asking why I looked angry all the time. About my dad in his wheelchair, worried about how we'd maintain financial stability. About Jerry Sullivan's wife fighting cancer while he scrambled to find another position with medical coverage. "Let it escalate," I said. Some engagements are worth conducting, but something happened during that meeting that I didn't expect. As Knox reviewed the evidence, something shifted in his demeanor. The professional facade dropped slightly, and I could see something personal underneath. "Mr. Ford, can I ask you something off the record?" "Affirmative. You served, didn't you?" "Navy, from the way you organize information and communicate." 8 years, Intelligence Division. Knox nodded slowly. "Marine Corps myself. 20 years ago, but you never really stopped being a Marine." He set down the papers. "What Harlan's doing here, it reminds me of bad officers I served under. The kind who think leadership means breaking people until they comply." For the first time, this wasn't just a business transaction. This was one veteran talking to another about chain of command abuse, about officers who mistook fear for respect. "The thing about bad officers," Knox continued, "is they always leave evidence. They can't help documenting their authority. And that evidence always comes back to eliminate them." We talked for another 30 minutes. Not just about the case, but about service, about leading people the right way, about the responsibility that comes with authority. Knox understood what Victor was doing because he'd seen it before, in military contexts where lives were at stake. When I left his office, it wasn't just with the promise of a board meeting. It was with the knowledge that I had an ally who understood the mission on a personal level. Knox called 3 days later. Emergency board meeting set for Friday morning. By Thursday night, word had leaked somehow. These things always do in corporate environments. My phone started receiving communications from former colleagues, some supportive, some warning me to exercise caution, some clearly conducting reconnaissance to report back to Victor. The one that surprised me came from an unknown number. "You're executing the right mission. Don't let them conduct psychological operations against you." I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to a generic voicemail. Someone else in that building was conducting resistance operations even if they couldn't do it openly. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. I put on my dress uniform, the navy blue suit I'd worn to board presentations back when I actually had employment. and drove to Ridgefield for what might be the final engagement. The boardroom was on the executive floor, all mahogany and leather and intimidating corporate insignia. I'd only been up there a handful of times in 10 years, usually to deliver archived documents during legal proceedings. Today felt different. Today I wasn't just the guy who organized files, I was the operator who'd brought the intelligence to dismantle an empire. Victor entered at exactly 900 hours, red power tie, that confident bearing that said he owned the operational space. He saw me positioned there and his expression went through several phases: surprise, anger, tactical calculation. By the time he took his position at the head of the table, he'd settled on his usual predatory confidence. "Gentlemen," he said, not acknowledging me, "I understand we're here to discuss some allegations from a disgruntled former employee. I'm confident we can resolve this quickly." Preston Knox adjusted his glasses and opened the folder I'd provided him. "Mr. Harland, we've received documentation of systematic labor law violations, falsified productivity reports, and what appears to be deliberate fraud regarding operational costs." The first document hit the table, Victor's memo outlining the 90-hour workweek requirements. His signature clear as artillery smoke at the bottom. The silence in that boardroom was tactically absolute. Preston Knox continued his briefing while every other person at that table conducted their own threat assessment of Victor's position. Victor attempted a counter-offensive. "Mr. Knox, that's taken out of operational context. It's about setting performance standards." "Performance standards?" Knox deployed another document. "Or systematic wage theft? Because requiring 90 hours of work while compensating for 40 hours meets the legal definition of labor fraud." More intelligence followed. The termination patterns. The meeting transcript where Victor admitted planning my elimination. Email chains showing coordination between department heads to enforce the illegal quotas. Each piece of evidence was another precision strike against the defensive position Victor had built for himself. His confident expression underwent tactical deterioration from assured to concerned to something approaching operational panic. But what happened next I hadn't included in my mission planning. Richard Caldwell, one of the older board members I'd barely noticed during previous operations, stood slowly. His voice carried the strain of someone conducting a difficult after-action report. "My son served under you here. IT department. Good kid. Just wanted to prove himself in his first civilian position." Caldwell's hands showed slight tremor as he spoke. "Last year he collapsed after working a 70-hour operational cycle. Spent 2 days in the hospital. I blamed him for pushing beyond his limits." The room maintained absolute operational silence. "Now I understand it wasn't his choice. It was your direct order, Victor. You nearly eliminated my boy for your productivity metrics." That's when Victor's command structure cracked completely. Not from legal arguments or shareholder concerns, but from a father's operational grief that every other parent in that room understood on a personal level. Victor attempted one final defensive maneuver. "Richard, I had no intelligence about your son's medical situation. If there was a health emergency, there was no emergency." Caldwell cut off his retreat. "There was just your policy. Your signature on that memo requiring 90 hours weekly. My boy was following your direct orders." Knox deployed another document. "Mr. Harland, according to these records, the Caldwell incident was reported to HR. You personally signed authorization for disciplinary action against the employee for time management issues." That's when Victor finally understood the tactical situation. His position was completely compromised. Knox continued his systematic destruction of Victor's defensive arguments. Email after email, memo after memo, all with Victor's signature. An intelligence trail that led directly back to every decision, every policy, every life he damaged in pursuit of his operational objectives. "This is misinterpretation," Victor said, but his voice had lost all command authority. "Standard business practices. Every corporation demands commitment from their personnel." "Commitment?" Another board member engaged. Patricia Wells, who'd maintained operational silence until now. "Mr. Harland, this isn't commitment. This is systematic exploitation. And according to these financial records, you've been reporting the unpaid overtime as operational efficiency gains to our investors. Final strike, securities fraud, lying to shareholders. The kind of charge that brings federal investigations and prison sentences." Knox gathered the intelligence package together. "The evidence is overwhelming. We have documented labor law violations, systematic wage theft, falsified financial reports, and deliberate fraud regarding operational costs." Victor conducted a final reconnaissance of the room, searching for allies who weren't operational. The same managers who'd sat silently while he destroyed careers were nowhere to be seen. Even his hand-selected executives had abandoned his command. "You're making a tactical error," he said, desperation breaking through his command voice. "The company's more profitable than it's ever been. Stock prices are up 30% since I assumed command." Built on stolen labor and fraudulent reporting, Knox replied with military precision. "Mr. Harland, effective immediately, you are relieved of duty as CEO of Ridgefield Dynamics. Security will escort you from the premises." The gavel came down like artillery impact. Victor stood there for a moment, looking like a commander who'd just watched his entire operational base collapse in real time. Then security arrived. The same guards who'd acknowledged me countless nights when I worked late shifts, who'd escorted me out just 2 weeks ago. Victor conducted his final withdrawal alone. No supporters, no defensive cover, no one willing to risk their own position to provide him aid. That's the thing about command through fear. When the fear breaks, there's no operational structure left holding the position together. After Victor's extraction, Knox addressed me directly. "Mr. Ford, the board owes you both an apology and an offer." "What kind of offer?" "Interim CEO while we search for permanent command replacement. You understand this company's operations better than anyone, and frankly, we need someone we can trust to conduct cleanup operations." I considered it for exactly 3 seconds. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Knox, but negative. 10 years was sufficient operational time, but I do have a tactical recommendation." I suggested Patricia Wells, who'd been running operations quietly and effectively while Victor grabbed media attention. Someone who understood that treating personnel like human beings wasn't just good ethics, it was good operational strategy. 3 weeks later, I was positioned in my backyard watching Madison practice walking without her crutches when Knox called with a situation report. Victor was facing federal charges for securities fraud. The Department of Labor was conducting investigations into Ridgefield's overtime practices, and the new command had implemented a 40-hour work week with actual compensated overtime for anything beyond that. "There's one more piece of intelligence," Knox said. "We identified who leaked you that meeting transcript. It was Victor's own assistant. She'd been documenting everything for months, waiting for someone to initiate operations." That intel made me smile. Even in Victor's inner circle, someone had been conducting resistance operations. Madison made it all the way across the yard without the crutches, grinning like she'd just completed basic training. My dad cheered from his wheelchair on the porch, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like all operational objectives were secure. A few days later, I received communication from Jerry Sullivan. Word had gotten around about what happened, and he wanted to express gratitude. His wife was conducting successful operations against the cancer, remission, the doctors reported, and he'd found new employment with a company that actually respected work-life operational balance. "You didn't just achieve justice for yourself," he told me. "You achieved justice for all of us." That's when I understood what this whole mission had really been about. It wasn't retaliation, it was accountability. Victor had built his empire on the assumption that fear and silence would provide him permanent defensive cover. But intelligence has a way of surfacing, especially when someone's willing to conduct proper reconnaissance. I ended up establishing my own consulting operation, helping companies organize their records and compliance systems. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that pays well and allows me to be home for evening chow every night. Madison's back to riding her bike, though she promises to maintain better situational awareness at intersections. My dad's conducting physical therapy and getting stronger every week. As for Victor, last intelligence indicated he was facing 10 years in federal prison and approximately $50 million in financial penalties. Turns out stealing wages from hundreds of employees adds up to serious money when the government conducts its own investigation. The new Ridgefield operates like a professional organization instead of a prison camp. Patricia Wells runs it like a business rather than a military dictatorship. Employees actually take authorized leave. People depart at reasonable hours to spend time with their families, and somehow productivity is higher than it ever was under Victor's regime. Funny how that operational principle works. Treat people like human beings, and they'll work harder for you than if you treat them like equipment. Looking back, I think about that night when Victor terminated me in front of all those managers. He thought he was making an example of me, demonstrating what happened when you prioritize family before corporate objectives. What he actually accomplished was creating his own primary adversary, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from bringing him down. Sometimes the most important tactical decision you can make is to say negative at exactly the right moment. Not because you're looking for engagement, but because some missions are more important than keeping your head down and following questionable orders. Victor built his empire on silence and fear. Turns out, all it took to bring it down was one person willing to break that silence in a basement full of intelligence he thought was safely classified. If you're dealing with your own Victor Harland right now, remember this: the evidence is probably already there. You just need to be willing to conduct proper reconnaissance. And more importantly, you need to be willing to deploy it. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is simply the truth.